Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are on this fast forward planet, which is wrapped in so many layers of turbulent change that I stopped enumerating them. This is a Sustain What pop up show on a morning when there's a lot of news about climate change. The Trump administration has made it clear for a long time that it's going to do whatever it can to push back, reverse, and otherwise undermine regulations and funding and so many other aspects of what previous presidents, including some Republicans, have done to address climate change and reduce the risk to all of us from unabated emissions. But what happened today is, again, the Wall Street Journal last night and the New York Times today have really substantial articles laying out that this is a week when his team is going to push forward with trying to unravel this endangerment finding from that came out in the Obama administration that underpins a lot of what government can do when it comes to climate risk and climate change. Gernot Wagner is a friend, a colleague at Columbia University when I was there. He previously at Harvard, longstanding analyst of the issues that arise when climate science and policy intersect. He's an economist by training, but really has dug in on the regulatory questions as well. And I thought it'd be great just to have a quick conversation about where we're at, what's likely to unfold, and then where do we go from here. So, Gernot, just good morning to you. When you think about where we're at in this term of the Trump administration, given all the work you put in on this issue, what's the first reaction you have when you see the Journal last night or the Times today, and then we'll get into explaining, what this means for the average person.
I guess let me start by saying I'm not a lawyer, right?
Right.
So if it won't become obvious pretty quickly, and in many ways, what is in fact happening are legal maneuvers that, in some sense, under normal circumstances, seem to be the sort of thing that ought not hold up in court.
Right.
But of course, we know where that leads to. And again, this is very much the legal interpretation, right? So there'll be a 6-3 Supreme Court decision at some point that may or may not be based in what the rest of us might consider facts.
Right.
Right. And actually, this is straight out of the New York Times story. But when Myron Ebel basically says, we are pretty close to total victory, right? This is a quote from.
Yeah.
That's not a good day for the climate, for all sorts of obvious reasons. I guess. Okay. And let me just pivot completely and just, instead of trying to parse the legalese, and in many ways, right, none of us has seen the actual text of what is going to happen, right? So on the legality of it all, in fact, most of it is speculative.
Right.
We can say quite a bit about broader, let's call it philosophical fight, but of course, it is not philosophy; it's just raw knuckle politics, where lots of this, all of it, frankly, is being framed as a victory for the economy, a victory for cost cutting and so on, because there's this burdensome regulation that is finally disappearing and it will unleash American energy, right? So what is it now?
By the way, just the news: energy stocks surge amid Trump climate rollback. That's the headline right now.
So sure, but okay, hold on. Which energy stocks, right?
Right. Well,
and
exactly.
just to be clear, I mean, by the way, of course, not a surprising move, right? So
No, of course.
it's about regulating utilities that burn fossil fuels, stationary source air pollution. So of course, right? Like, you can supercharge. The average day trader is celebrating if
Exactly.
they happen to have bet on, fossil stocks increasing today.
Right.
Um, is that in any way, shape, or form a long-term play? Is it in any way, shape, or form the sort of thing that's often being described as, oh, and this shows, value, right? Like if stocks are supposed to show value of a company, like, value, of course, has, multiple meanings here. Short term, is there a buck to be made? Yeah, of course.
Right.
Right. If you don't feel like betting on, every play at the Super Bowl and you bet instead on what happens on a daily basis for one stock or another, yeah, right. Gamblers can gamble with this.
Right.
Um, is this the sort of thing that, would get the Warren Buffetts of the world excited about long-term value in one sector or another? No.
Right.
Right.
And
And
and,
just to give
and
you one sense of this, so almost at the same time, but this has been making for a while. But we have these stay open orders for coal plants around the country.
yeah, I wanted to ask you about this.
It was
I thought
actually,
this was a
I
free
woke up to this
market.
news this morning, right? So this is like the sort of the vindicative moves against Colorado writ large.
Right.
And one example is the federal government ordering this one completely uneconomic coal plant in Colorado. And by the way, almost all coal plants in this country, and by the way, around the world for the most part, are uneconomic by now. And what I mean
Right.
uneconomic, right? This is a somewhat simple calculation, of course, but this is literally comparing the operating cost of the coal plant compared to the full-on capital expenditure plus operating expenditure, but get full-on investment in the replacement, either in form of solar plus batteries or wind and batteries. And almost every coal plant in this country, for sure, around the world, mostly, there's like, 212 or whatever Indonesian coal plants, 5 of them, it's still optimal, quote unquote, to burn the coal for
Right.
economic reasons. For everything else, it would be cheaper to shut down the still operating coal plant, replace it with renewables plus battery storage,
Right.
and start from
Right.
scratch.
In a country that
Um,
they claim faces an energy emergency.
in the US, you mean? No, back to
Right.
the
Right.
US.
Right.
Yeah,
Right. Right.
exactly, right. And okay, you know this, but so I, spent almost a decade of my life working for EDF, Environmental Defense Fund, not the French utility. By now, we have another EDF, right? We have the Energy Dominance Financing Office at the Department of Energy, and
I didn't know. I didn't know about that.
yeah, there's a new EDF in town. And it's the sort of thing where, okay, fine, whatever, names, fine. But what we consider to be worthwhile investing in order to ensure that energy dominance, of course, right, isn't the cheapest sources of electricity, for example. It's there we go, Office of Energy Dominance Financing. It is investing in propping up coal, propping up gas, investing in gas.
Incredible.
Well, again, short term, can you make a buck off fossil fuels? Yeah, of course you can. Right?
Right.
If and when oil is coming out of Venezuela again, right, there'll be people who will gain monetarily in the short run,
Right.
of course. Does this say anything about the long-term trends, long-term tech, finance, economics of renewables versus fossil fuels? Of course not.
Right. Yeah. So this issue of short term and long term just seems to keep coming up in a country where all of our politics is sort of not even short term, but immediate term, and there's just no. It feels like this will play out for years, right? This litigation.
Um, so it'll take a while, yes, right. So what we are trying to undo here, and what the Trump administration is trying to undo here is the Supreme Court decision 16 years ago that, yes, declared CO2 to be a greenhouse gas. right?
Right.
To be a pollutant. That's the, in other words, Clean Air Act, Clean Air Act Amendment applies to CO2. Were at the Obama administration at the time, in fact, like for example, had to increased, didn't have to, but increased the lower bound of how much CO2 you need to emit in order to fall into to fall under this ruling, right? So
Right.
it turns out that there is, for criteria air pollutant, for SO2 and so on, the threshold is much lower. And, this is sort of one of the ironies in this, right? So there's the Obama administration, in some sense, not bending over backwards necessarily, but in some sense, compromise, saying, you know what? We don't want to regulate anyone who emits those low levels of CO2. We increase the threshold, orders of magnitude, dramatically. And this is, ironically, this is one of the moves being criticized here of, oh, you exempted all of this. You couldn't have, you shouldn't have. And therefore, but usual legal term, and again with a big caveat, not a lawyer, but arbitrary and capricious. Right, is something we all of us know all too well. Well, that original ruling was anything but, and still, basically, the argument now is that, oh yeah, you've got to get rid of that because, for example, the lower bound was set too high, or was set higher than the actual Clean Air Act amendments say it should be. Right? It's that sort of thing. And just to be clear, again, not a lawyer. Please don't ask me any follow-up questions on this particular topic. But it's that sort of question where the moves right now, well, are okay. They are vindicative and fairly erratic. Of course, pushing in one and only one direction, which is, let it rip one more time for fossil fuels, while all the signs point in one and only one direction.
And that long-term decarbonization trend feels ultimately like it will continue. I don't know if you have your sense of if fitting this moment. Yes. Do you see this more as a moment, or is it like the undoing? There has been some coverage recently of globally, some step backs from climate commitments and the like. And how much of this do you fear might be a real retrenchment?
Yes and no. Okay, so let me turn up my European accent even more than usual. So we've had Doge here in this country, right? So there's efforts at efficiency, and famously, of course, those were not scalpels being used. That was a hatchet job, basically just getting rid of USAID and sort of getting rid of entire agencies and just gutting regulation, gutting foreign aid, for example. Okay. Well, Europe too has seen a rightward shift in politics. Right. So the European Parliament, famously sort of made up of many parties. Each country has their own sort of party structure, and then they send parliamentarians, and then they try to find coalitions within that massive experiment in democracy. Okay. Rightward shift in European politics. The second Ursula von der Leyen administration, she as the European Commission president, trying to find majorities and reacting to this quote unquote rightward shift in European politics. Okay, back to Doge. Well, Europe too now is looking for ways to, what you might call make its environmental policies, more efficient, cutting costs. And just to give you one sense of sort of a set of hard numbers that I happen to have in the back of my mind, because I just taught a class about it, so very much back of my mind. So Europe has this emissions trading system, continent-wide. It's being expanded as we speak. Yes, this expansion is now being proposed to be delayed by a year, but that alone is an example, right? So the weakening of laws in Europe means, let's delay implementation by a year, which, cuts costs. But frankly, if you're large multinational being affected by this particular law, you're not going to change your business model full on. It might save you some money now, but largely what it saves you at is the immediate implementation. You now have more time to plan for a rational implementation of this law. Okay, European Union emissions trading system has a tariff, a carbon tariff that came into place this past year. It's called CBAM, the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism. By the way, it's the sort of tariff that our good friends at the Economist, right, who end every article with "and therefore free trade is good," they like this kind of tariff, as they should, right? Like, it's the sort of tariff that puts things on a level playing field, protects European industry in the process of basically ensuring that there's climate policy that now actually has a very natural way of expanding, right? So if you are South Korea, you produce a bunch of steel, 5% of it goes to Europe, you might consider that intervention, CBAM, the tariff, carbon tariff, an impetus to now invest in in green steel here in South Korea in order not to fall victim to this tariff and pay the money to Brussels. Why not keep the money invested domestically, right? That's the idea. It works. It's a climate policy that works. Okay. DOGE and CBAM. So the European DOGE effort on the CBAM, on this carbon tariff front, was to say, we will now exempt 90% of European companies from this tariff. And in doing so, right, so this is the small, mid-sized companies, the German Mittelstand, right, who now got exempt, while keeping 99+% of the emissions. Now, from a pure climate perspective, is this good? No, it's not. It really isn't, right? A slight weakening of that law. That's not good. From a sort of DOGE climate economic perspective, is that is a rational way to find ways to cut costs while maintaining almost all of the efficacy of this law? Absolutely, right? Minus 90% coverage, 99+% of emissions still covered. That's what I would call a rational response to, again, this rightward shift in European politics, where there are parties on the right who are shouting against climate policies. Of course, they always are, and it's that sort of broad sea change, if you will, the pendulum swinging in this direction, that then leads to steps like delaying the implementation, slight weakening, and so on. And I read the article you have up here. So this is actually from a couple months ago, right?
Yeah.
But this is the sustainability directives reporting requirements of companies, right? Okay, all the massive, Allianz, Europe's largest asset manager, largest insurer globally, and so on. Are they suddenly going to change what they do? No. Does it save them some money in the short run because implementation is delayed by a year? Maybe. But in some sense, it saves a bit on the transition costs. The end goal is still the same, right? Okay, that's one way to, in some sense, deal with, there are costs to environmental rules. Okay, back to the US. What we seem to be doing here is basically try to get rid of the fact that CO2 is a pollutant in the first place.
Right. I want to show folks your website. It's gwagner.com. And if they go there, you actually have a button.
This is the Trump label. Yes. Okay.
I know you have.
Holy crap! There's 64 entries just on the Trump. Okay, interesting.
There you go. So go to gwagner.com and you can learn more about all the work that Gernot is doing. And it is depressing to think that you have a button.
Wait, hold on. My work is depressing. Oh, is that Trump label is depressing?
No. Yeah. Is there anything that's happening? If you look at the sphere of things, they are the weakening, the sort of accelerating permitting, the nuclear stuff that's underway, some support there. Is there anything else that's happening under Trump that has some marginally, potentially positive effect in the long term? Or is it just swamped by the negatives?
Okay. I mean, it's always hard to. It's always hard to find the right words to this, right? Because in some sense, right, like this is not permission to vote for him, right? Basically, let me put it that way. But right, actually, let me see what I can navigate my own website. Can you click on Columbia?
Yeah.
So what I'm trying to find is a piece I did last July. So maybe just scroll down. There's Columbia. But
you're a busy man.
Yeah, actually, okay. So if you go to gwagner.com/CKI, that's the way to find it directly. Actually, no, go to 2 now here, to the second page, almost there.
I see second page.
So, yeah, to 2. Thank you. There we go. America's clean energy transition will continue despite the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. Okay, go to this graph, this chart down there. Okay, right. So this is our rapid response in some sense, response to OB3A.
Right.
Right, and the left, the blue lines is the Inflation Reduction Act, Democratic law. The red lines is red, Republican. Right.
That's interesting. This is cool.
Right. Okay. So thank you. And by the way, it still holds up. We have like a slightly changed version now, but honestly, the substance didn't change. The numbers in the backgrounds ever so slightly. But okay. So yeah, what happened? Well, solar and wind, investment tax credit, production tax credit, got it. Green hydrogen, 45V, got it. And you can go down, right? EV subsidies, right? Despite, Elon jumping up and down on the stage and his salute or whatever, didn't get much out of this for Tesla, right? Those subsidies gone. Meanwhile, look at the lines where things overlap. Carbon capture.
Right.
Energy storage, long-term storage, geothermal, and nuclear.
Right.
And okay, let me try the best possible interpretation of this, or put a lot of benefit of that in interpreting what is going on the Trump side here. What we see here, what these overlapping lines mean, frankly, is that there is 100% bipartisan support now for subsidies for geothermal and nuclear, for example,
right?
Or carbon capture, for that matter. Right. So IRA, famously a purely Democratic bill, 50 plus, the vice president casting the deciding vote at the time. OB3A, a purely Republican bill. But yeah, we have 100 senators. Yeah, some of the names changed, but 100 senators, bipartisan support for subsidies for geothermal and nuclear. Right. This is policy certainty if there ever was one. Policy certainty if there ever was one. Right. So if you are a geothermal startup looking at this saying, yeah, I can invest now, or, investor in geothermal can look at this and say, you know what, this is policy certainty here. And by the way, just geothermal as a quick sense on how quickly things are moving. This is the Biden era Department of Energy liftoff reports for different technologies, and there were 2 for geothermal, power and heating and cooling. The Biden era predictions of where geothermal is going to go. So this is, 18 months or so ago, not that long ago, were woefully lowercase conservative on where things are going, right? Things are changing so quickly in the right direction. And yeah, of course, right? It helps that you have Chris Wright, our energy secretary, stand in front of a sign, magma, drill baby drill, right? This is the geothermal lobby, basically, and association, right? Industry association, inviting him to speak at their conference and talking up geothermal. There are a lot of synergies here between what oil and gas is good at, right? Why not frack for heat if you're already used to fracking for gas, for example, right? Is there excitement on that front? Yes. Now, is geothermal going to be the dominant power source, low carbon power source? No, that's still solar and wind. And now, right, arguably, one could say, actually, solar and wind doesn't need those subsidies, doesn't need those massive, massive subsidies from the Inflation Reduction Act. Look at Texas. Look at
Right.
the exponential takeoff of solar in Texas compared to, let's say, California, where Texas surpassed California October 24 or so in utility scale solar, not because of state level policies,
Yeah.
but because, well, solar PV is a technology. It can only get better and cheaper over time.
Yeah. So I found a bigger version of the graph. I just want to
Okay, cool. Yeah.
walk through this is because this is really interesting. I wish I had seen it sooner, but it's certainly highly relevant as we think about where we're at.
Yep.
That the legal issues are going to play out for years, but at the same time, on policy, you see several areas, actually 4 areas where
Yep.
there is alignment of Republican and Democratic, and even Trump.
Yeah, and
prescribed
the
interests.
devil's in the detail. Let me draw attention to carbon capture, right? So the 45Q tax credit, yes, has been reaffirmed. So we do pay in this country $180 in tax credits if you suck CO2 out of thin air.
Yeah.
You pay, right? You get $85 if you take it out of a smokestack. The difference, suddenly we also give subsidies for enhanced oil recovery.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So if you take the CO2, pump it into your oil well, gas well to get more out of the ground, more fossil fuels out of the ground, you now also can claim subsidies, right? So, not good. And yeah, it turns out that's the vast majority of actually functioning carbon capture efforts out there are in fact EOR style efforts
Mm-hmm.
by the oil and gas industry. The fact that we subsidize that now, not good. The fact that we subsidize air capture to the tune of $180 per ton of CO2, well, European companies have incentives because of European Union emissions trading system. It's like $80 around, 80 euros, 80
Yeah.
bucks per ton of CO2. In this country, 180 for direct air capture. Is that the sole climate tech that deserves subsidies? Absolutely not. But yeah, is there, quote unquote, bipartisan consensus to subsidize that? Yeah, there is.
Right. And then one last thing is that now with industry suddenly scrambling, at least the technology industry scrambling for more generation. I did some other webcasts, including with Michael Liebrich about
Uh-huh.
AI, and their push is going to potentially also add some oomph to the, let's say, small nuclear or some of these other options that might not have been there without that demand side surge. Is that something that can potentially go in the right direction, even as they're kind of boosting demand for energy overall?
Yes and no. And actually, so what we are looking at here, by the way, is what I would call one of these CKI slides, the Climate Knowledge Initiative that I lead here at Columbia Business School. And yeah, we produce gazillion of these slides day in and day out.
Yeah.
And our latest deep dive just up a week or so ago was on powering data centers. So the shortcut, if you, it's gwagner.com/CKI-AI.
Okay.
And yeah, right. So there's a lot more to say here. And by the way, the immediate prior deep dive was on nuclear, and we're about to do one on geothermal. And of course, we have them up on solar and wind and batteries and sustainable proteins and lots of other topics.
Okay. Let me see if we can get to
and yeah, to big picture, it turns out that there is a lot of renewed interest in investments in new generation, frankly, especially in the US. Europe is behind in many ways on the AI front, and also on generation 4 AI. And China has a better AI, turns out, right? DeepSeek. They even have the better name. I mean, actually, that's the fascinating thing, right? Like we come up with ChatGPT or whatever we call these things, and China comes along, just calls it DeepSeek and does it 10 times more efficiently, right? So never mind all of that. But yeah, so there's a deep dive on data centers. There is cement and lots of other topics here. And maybe just if you click on this and look at the one slide shown here in this overview, and to be clear, we are on my little website, and all of this also lives on the Columbia Business School website, or that's the primary place it does live. Right, Europe versus the US versus China here, or US, China, Europe in these 3 graphs. yeah, there's this massive push for new generation here in the US. Um, and some, not all, is in fact good for renewables. It is, right? So you have these hyperscalers, the Googles, Amazons, Microsofts, CloudWaves of the world, who are now investing massive sums in any and all generation they can find, right? So they drive electricity prices up for the rest of us in the process and so on, right? There are lots and lots of trade-offs, lots of questions, lots of problems. And I'm not even talking about using AI to plagiarize on student assignments, right? That's a different story. But don't get me started on that one.
Yeah.
But it is it's on the generation side, right? So I mean, the big gray area on the bottom is natural gas,
Right.
right? And by the way, the big black area in China is coal,
Right.
right?
Right.
So there's a lot of that happening too, unfortunately, and yeah, that takes policy, right? And actually, you see this in China. You see sort of the coal peak even despite AI, right? You see sort of, yes, more and more coal, but before 2030, you already see coal declining again here. Okay, in the US for natural gas, not so much, right? Increase and stable, at least for the time being. Okay, the rest, solar, wind. Yes, there's nuclear here too. And yeah, you see this big push in this direction of any and all new electricity as cheap as possible. And maybe let me end on, frankly, pointing you to a website, somebody else's analysis on this, offgridai.us.
Oh, interesting.
Which is one of the more interesting. I mean, the URL says it all, right? How do you get fast, cheap, scalable, clean energy into the system? And even if
Right.
you remove the clean, right? Fast, scalable, cheap, if that's all you care about,
Right.
you know what? Solar PV is a thing, turns out, including for AI. And maybe the most interesting bit here is consider the source. So this is an effort led by Nan Ranzerhoff, was at the time, right? December a year ago. She is the head of climate at Stripe. She famously leads the $1 billion-ish carbon removal fund, Frontier Fund, for Stripe, the payment company,
Right. Right.
fintech company, right? This is her waking up after the Trump election and saying, "Oh my God, right? How to do this?" And it turns out solar PV is a key answer, even here, or maybe especially here, right? If you need fast, cheap, scalable electricity, and again, the clean is important, but forget about that for now. Just fast and cheap. Yeah, the fastest thing you can do is build massive solar PV capacity. And
That's
this
so
is a very
interesting.
well done. I mean, it's a lengthy blog post, but it's a very detailed analysis that tells you, right, where to build the data center, how to power it, and more often than not, the answer is solar PV.
Well, this is great. I really appreciate amid everything you're taking a little time to
To
come on
plug
the
somebody
show.
else's website. So,
No, but that too. But to come on the show and talk about this. And I hope everyone will go to gwagner.com and start to zoom in on where we go practically as the giant litigation efforts enrich lawyers on both sides for years to come and politicians' posture. But the energy realities seem to be driving themselves to a significant extent. Policy matters, as you say.
yep.
But we wouldn't have been having
Technological,
this
economic
conversation.
forces underlying it are pushing in one and only one direction.
And the innovation, 10 years ago, if we had this conversation, you wouldn't have had the the storage side
Yep.
there, which is a critical underpinning of the solar side,
Yep.
and so here we are.
Yep.
Thanks, Gernot Wagner, for coming on the show from Columbia University Business School. Go back to class, etc., and into writing. And this was just a pop-up sustain what effort to get people to understand where we are at, where we can go, and please do weigh in with questions. Just get a hold of me through that scrolling bar at the bottom whenever you see this with ideas for future shows and questions for Gernot, and I can forward them to him. I'll be posting on this, on Sustain What. Thanks.
Thanks so much. That was
Take
fun.
care. Be well amid
Bye.
all. Bye-bye.